Hello and welcome, everybody. It is Tuesday, May 18th, 2021, and you know what that means? It means it's time to get nerdy. Welcome to episode 189 of Two Nerds in a Pod, the nerdiest gaming podcast in the multiverse. I am Maction, and I have my fellow connoisseur of comedy, fellow nerd, fellow partner in crime, Mr. Lamgaluka, also known as Mr. Nice Guy 425. And quick shout out to our returning sponsor, Game Insider Magazine. Mr. Nice Guy, how are you, my friend?
Man, I'm doing fantastic, Mac. I literally have no complaints. Like everything is going super smoothly. The move is progressing, and as many of you know, I'm moving from Illinois to Wisconsin. And here's the kicker, Mac. I've always wanted a pool table, right? I'm not a pool expert, right? I'm not even that good at pool. I'm probably average, but I just feel like it's a fun thing to have. But the hassle of getting one, something that I've never wanted to do, right? You got to carry it downstairs. You got to assemble it. It's just a pain. You got to make sure it's level. It's a thing to get a pool table. Well, the kind older couple who is selling us their home in Wisconsin, leaving a pool table in the basement. So I don't have to move it. I don't have to pay for it. I don't have to assemble it. I just have to play it. And so I'm super excited for that.
This is a dream come true. You are, man, any number of people would kill to be in your position there.
I know. And the reality is they probably just don't want to take it, right? It's
Oh,
almost
yeah.
like easier to not, but it's like in good condition. It looks nice. So I'm super excited. I feel like there's a plot in almost every 90s sitcom where some kid or some teen goes to play pool at a pool hall, wins the first couple games, and then gets hustled out of their money, and like their mom or dad has to go down and bail them out. This happens in Family Matters. It happens in Fresh Prince of Bel-Air.
I
This is a
remember Fresh
recurring.
Prince, but I don't remember it happening in Family Matters.
It does, and Carl goes down there with his mother, and they win back Eddie's money.
Oh, and doesn't he do a thing with like baby powder and does a sort of like cross with the baby powder?
I think so.
Yeah.
I think so.
Okay, it's all coming back to me now.
Yeah, so I feel like now I need to film a 90s sitcom in my basement. And that is one of my highlights of the week. But Mac, what's good with you, man? What's up?
Oh, man. Well, it's been a fun and enjoyable week. There are developments that I can't go into right now, but just so you know, developments are happening. There will be time for me to talk about it in coming episodes, but just want to tease you there. I've been doing a lot of research and revamping and stuff for Legalese that I'm excited to get to later this evening. And in my personal life, it's just been kind of great. The weather's been amazing. It's been not too hot, not too cold, plenty of rain. I used to live in the desert, so any rain seems like a cause for rejoicing, even if it is, more typical weather here. But yeah, it's just been a great week, great time, saw some family, and I'm looking forward to, some coming really good weeks. So just all in all, I feel like things are on the up and up, and that pool table just proves it.
Dude, you've got to do you play pool? Do you play pool at all?
When
Probably.
I worked at an arcade, there was a pool table, and I got okay at it.
Dude, I just feel like that's something we've got to do when you come hang.
Oh, absolutely. So
We've
on the
gotta
list,
get
we
some
have
games in.
pool table, we have Half-Life
D&D?
Alyx, we have D&D.
Yeah.
I mean, it's all coming together.
It's all coming together. Yeah. Dude, there's no song reference there. But regardless, Mac, good vibes all around. Shout out to everyone who's here. Love y'all so much. I say we do what we do best and hop right up into this gaming news, my friend. I'm so excited. What do you think about that?
Lay it on me, friend.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, as Max said earlier, this is Two Nerds in a Pod, episode number 189. the nerdiest video game podcast in the galaxy. And we have a doozy for you this week. Mac, we're going to focus on kind of a theme for the news this week. We're going to talk about cryptocurrency and how it relates to gaming. Do you know a lot about crypto, about Bitcoin, about Ethereum, just about crypto in general?
I am somewhat familiar with the general machinations of cryptocurrencies and
Yeah, so
how blockchain, for especially I feel like in 2019 everything had blockchain as a buzzword on it. It was
yeah.
practically a marketing term like synergistic promotion or stuff like that.
Yeah, no, for sure. And there's like two pretty big stories in my opinion in the news this week that deal with Bitcoin and crypto. So let's jump right in and chat. As you know, this is a live show. We love to get your opinions as we go through. So this first news story is from Liam Wiseman from IGN.com. Sony Interactive Entertainment has filed a patent for a platform that would allow users to bet on esports using physical currency, Bitcoin, or even in game items. According to a listing on PatentScope, Sony initially filed the patent in 2019, but has only published it this month. The patent itself suggests a system where viewers of live streamed esport events, such as fighting game tournaments, would be able to bet on the outcome of matches whilst watching the action play out in real time. The system would work via a user interface overlay that could be brought up over the stream in order for the user to place their bets. So Mac, there's tons of implications here legally, ethically, economically, right? Because one, this needs to be monitored closely, right? You can't technically have minors gambling. Two, is Bitcoin, is crypto a legitimate enough currency for us to use in gambling? Because the price literally fluctuates, right? From second to second. I want to get Mac's thoughts on these implications. And if this is, I mean, just what do you think about this?
Well, in general, some thoughts. I know just enough about economics to know that it's not the craziest thing. The price of stuff fluctuates, even when you're talking about the US dollar. It fluctuates sometimes somewhat wildly
I
and
figured you'd
somewhat
say that.
rapidly.
Yeah, I figured you'd bring that up. Good
Yeah,
point.
so I don't think that fluctuation in and of itself. Now that to be said, I don't want you to feel like I'm trying to tear everything down. I
No,
agree
no.
with you overall, and I actually think that that any one of these things taken by itself is a sort of thing that I'm like, well, maybe that's not the biggest idea, but I think taken together, I agree with you that it's like, better keep an eye on this. I mean, you don't want to keep book if you can't cover bets. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And like as a parent, like there's the part of me that's like, man, I don't want my kids to hop on the PlayStation and gamble, right? But
Hmm.
also, whose responsibility is it to stop that from happening?
Well, I'm
This
glad
this
that
guy.
you asked.
This guy.
Yep, that's
Yeah,
right.
it's mine, right? So, you know, that's a concern that I guarantee is going to come up, especially when we start talking about gambling. But technically, as we've dealt with all of these different games where you're paying to win, right? Or where there's loot boxes, or even just online stores. We've seen kids take their parents' credit card and go buy a bunch of stuff. And if they're dealing with loot boxes, in my opinion, that's pretty darn close to gambling as well. So,
Well, I mean,
as
there are a heck of a lot of courts and opinions, not so much in the United States, but definitely in the European Union that 100% agree with you. That are very much, that aren't even like loot boxes are close to gambling. That are like loot boxes equal
art,
gambling.
yeah, yeah. But I guess the real thing that I want to know is, Mech, what do you think about the premise of using something that fluctuates so rapidly in value as a betting mechanism? Because we literally saw this weekend crypto, or rather Bitcoin specifically, was $59,000 per coin. Over the course of the weekend, it dropped down to about 44,000, as low as 42,000, simply because Elon Musk tweeted out that Tesla may stop accepting Bitcoin to purchase cars, right? And Tesla's a huge company. He also implied that Tesla had sold their shares of Bitcoin, which he later said was not true. But regardless, it's very manipulable. It can be manipulated, right, by people with influence. Whereas the U.S. dollar, yeah, I guess you could say it does. but not to the same extent. So, should something that fluctuates so rapidly be used in gambling, in gaming specifically?
I don't think that the fluctuations in value, no matter how widely they do or how quickly they manage to fluctuate, are should be the grounds for not using it. I'm probably not going to do anything with Bitcoin myself because the volatility doesn't sit well with me. But I don't think that that's sufficient for me to say, nah, don't do anything with it. You know what I mean? I think the
Yeah, yeah.
ecological impacts of Bitcoin make I object more on that side of stuff than on the fluctuation side of stuff, if that
Okay.
makes
So when you
sense.
say ecological, you're talking about like the amount of energy that's used to acquire,
To
and also
acquire, to
to.
mine the Bitcoins, and to verify, yeah, that's I think that's rough.
Yeah, so we got some comments in the chat. Some very opinionated comments. What does he say? He says, this is Galvatron. He says, blockchain is also known as distributed computing. It started in cryptocurrency, but is now being used in mainstream cybersecurity. That's not an opinion. That's something he's stating. He also says cryptocurrency is a scam. This is his opinion. It's a Jenga tower that will collapse. So, a lot of people feel that way. I'll be honest, full disclosure, I own a small, small, small amount of Bitcoin, like a fraction of a Bitcoin, right? Because you don't have to buy a full Bitcoin because most of us do not have money to do that. You can put in, a few dollars here and there, and watch and see what it does. And I did it kind of out of curiosity at first, but I've seen it go up and go down as well. And so I think that maybe people should research it before they just assume that it's something bad, or not legitimate. So it's interesting to see what Sony will do with this. Speaking of mining, Mac, because you mentioned mining, and there is another news story about Bitcoin, specifically about mining. Did you have more to say before I move on?
No, please tell us more about mining.
Okay, so if you're a PC gamer, many of you know that Nvidia released their 3000 series of cards a few months ago, and they've been flying off the shelf. Like, if you want to get the 3080, 3070, 3060, they're going as fast, if not faster, than PS5s and Xbox, the new Xboxes, Xbox Series X, Xbox Series S. And part of the reason for that, Mac, is because people are buying these cards and using them to mine crypto. It's not even people who want the gaming capabilities, just people who want to make a few dollars. So this news story comes from Kotaku.com, written by Luke Plunkett. It says earlier this year, NVIDIA announced that their GeForce RTX 3060 graphics cards would ship with a reduced Ethereum hash rate, making them a lot less useful for crypto miners. They're now extending that to the RTX 3080, RTX 3070, and RTX 3060 Ti as well. From late May, all the above models will start shipping with LHR, light hash rate versions, with the ultimate goal being that gamers might find it easier to get their hands on them rather than crypto miners scooping them all up in bulk. Mac, did y'all all follow that in the chat? What they're doing here?
We did, and I would like to quote from Jurassic Park, Dr. Ian Malcolm. Life finds a way. And in spite of their best, now I would like to say here that I'm a little bit skeptical of the claim that that's what's happening, or that even that's going to be effective. Number one, because the people who are doing this are, I think, at least somewhat technically savvy, and being able to, circumvent this is probably very likely to happen. It's probably likely to happen very quickly. But also, I always ask myself, what benefits, cui bono, who benefits? And when I think of, well, do the companies who are selling the graphics cards, does it matter to them that gamers can't get their hands on them?
Right,
And it
exactly.
doesn't, because it just means that they've sold out all of their stock. And eventually, maybe it'll, once they've been used, lightly used, the graphics card will make their way to, to a gamer. But and it's even interesting because it's like they've got a built-in scapegoat. Just like, well, the cryptos, The crypto
Yeah,
people bought it
yeah,
all up.
yeah.
So I mean, I think at best this is a half-hearted publicity stunt. That
We're for
I
the gamers.
Yeah, that I don't think is actually going to serve its intended purpose. It won't stem the tide, I don't think. Anyway, that's just me being, you know, being a naysayer. I'm sorry, you had things you wanted to say.
No, no, I'm glad you said that. I think that there's some truth to what you're saying because their job is to make money. They're obviously making plenty of money because they can't keep the cards in stock, right? And this
Hmm.
isn't necessarily a result of coronavirus, and oh, it's harder to produce these cards. It's simply a matter of these cards are really popular and it's hard to keep them stocked, right? So I don't know. I guess to play devil's advocate a little bit, there is always the possibility that some of these game companies are putting pressure on them and saying, listen, when we put out our game, we said, hey, this is best played using your graphics card. And there was a wink, wink, nod, nod, when we talked about that. Excuse me.
Bless you.
Thank you. There was a wink, wink, nod, nod when we said, hey, we're going to promote your card. But now your card is not available to play with our games. So people aren't able to experience our game with the highest fidelity graphics, without the screen tearing, right? Without the best refresh rate, simply because all these crypto miners are buying them up instead. And so when we're getting reviews, we're seeing that, hey, people aren't even playing this at the highest settings. They're playing it with the old graphics card. And we don't like that. So, I'm playing devil's advocate, and maybe that's a stretch. But I also think it is a possibility that those types of conversations are happening.
Yeah, I think it's within the realm of possibility, certainly.
Yeah. So, as far as crypto mining goes, I have no problem with it. I think that it's cool that people are able to, from the comfort of their home, make passive income. And I'm a fan of that. Now, I guess you brought up the point of the ecological impact of mining the Bitcoin, of tracking the Bitcoin, and I get that. But I also think that it's kind of taking the power out of the hands of the man. And I'm not usually one to be against the man, right? Quote unquote the man. But I like that it's kind of almost an underground thing that nerds created and have come up with. I like that about
Hmm.
Bitcoin, about crypto in general. So
Yeah.
cool. What do people say in the chat? No comments on this other than some snarkiness from Galvatron. I see you posted a service desk. Is there a reference, like a shout out we should give?
Yeah, so it was Galvatron had mentioned that the next big scam is NFTs, non-fungible tokens.
Yep.
That's something that's recently come up. I mean, I know we're a little bit behind on that because that was big headline items maybe a month ago or so. Anyway, I mentioned Service Desk Podcast did a episode that was about non-fungible tokens and put a link in the chat
Ah,
there just because they covered it very well. Sam especially explained it just splendidly. So a good one
nice.
to listen
Yeah.
to if you want a crash course that's understandable and not heavy on technical jargon on what non-fungible tokens, what NFTs are.
Yeah, check it out. Friend of the show, Mets Girl, is on that show. One of the
Mm-hmm.
stars of that show. Cool. Well, let's move on to our next news story, Mac. And we've talked about this theme for a long time. Um, we'll do this one now. This is about GTA 5, and the release date for PS5 and Xbox Series X and S is finally announced. It is November 11th. And for those of you who don't know, GTA 5 has been out since 2013.
GTA
But
5 unites, it transcends consoles.
yeah, exactly. It really does. It transcends console. It transcends age. Everybody, can get down with a little bit of crime. In video games, I guess. So, Mac, here's my question for you. I'm not even going to read this story. When the PlayStation 5 was announced, they said, "Hey, we're going to put out GTA for this," and everyone was like, "Okay, that's cool," because people are still playing it. And we've talked about this with Skyrim. We've talked about this with other games. I want to take a different route than what we took the past few weeks. Do we even need new games anymore? Or can we? I'm serious. Like, it sounds like a dumb question. Or can we just have games as service that are constantly upgraded over decades? Like, do we need a new Chasm ever? Do we need a Chasm 2? Or can the developers of Chasm simply continue to add on new stuff as needed to keep the game fresh?
Dude, way to hit me where I live. But yeah,
Yeah.
no, I'm going to take the position here that we do need more video games. We do need more intellectual properties. And I think it's because video games themselves are more than just the entertainment. They're about the ideas, the feeling, the communication that they bring. And if it's all just the same game updated, it's not going to be necessarily as good. To couch it in terms of tabletop role playing games, which I am a big fan of, and shout outs to any of our TTRPG fans, but while you could do a lot of things in, say, Dungeons and Dragons 3rd edition. There were lots of variant rules. For example, there was a Stargate SG1 D20 that was made, and it was based off the 3rd edition Dungeons and Dragons rules. There were all these different settings and whole new rules things that, much in the way of like continually updating and releasing new stuff for the same setting, had some advantages, but sometimes it's worth contemplating a complete upgrade or a change in system in order to facilitate genre. Not necessarily always the case, but certainly it's worth having more options out there and more systems to tell different types of stories. I see the value in having different games for different things. And I think we would find, if we're just continually going for the same thing, we would find it to get stale rather quickly.
Yeah, I agree with what you said 100%, maybe 99%. And it seems like the chat's really vibing with what you said too. Galvatron brings up a valid point, and I'll end on this because we want to move on to our next thing. He brings up TVs and cars, and that's a really valid point. He says that's why they're released every year, and how Microsoft made so much money at releasing a new Windows every year is because there's too much profit in releasing periodic iterations. I agree, but I feel like that doesn't apply as much today as it did 10 years ago. Now, Galvatron, I think you're probably about the same age as us, elder millennial. Um,
I,
you know,
I
now
would
there's
I like being called the elder millennial. It sounds kind of like being the elder statesman, being
I
like,
agree. Yeah.
yes, I am the elder millennial from Millennial Congress.
We're very pretentious.
Oh,
Um,
absolutely. Let me
now there's DLC, now there's loot boxes, now there's different ways that those companies can still make that profit without releasing periodic iterations. With TVs and cars, it's kind of a different thing. The other point I'll make as a counterpoint to what he said is that when you have a game with online, you build a community. And if it's a strong enough game, that community will last a long time. There's still people who play the original Counter-Strike, right, on PC. So it's almost to the benefit of these game companies to keep those communities going as long as possible rather than annually releasing a new game.
Hmm.
That has been our news for the week.
All right. Well, we appreciate everybody's input and want you to keep it rolling because now we move on to some video game history. This week in years past saw many interesting and exciting game releases. And if any of these resonate with you, if you played these, if you loved these, please let us know. We'd love to hear your experience with these. We're going to start back in, we're going to start from 1996 and work our way forward. In 1996, released for the Super Nintendo, we had Super Mario RPG. Now, Mr. Nice,
Phenomenal.
yeah, I'm glad you liked
Yeah,
it.
dude, I love it. I love it. It's such a good game. What were you going to ask, though?
Well, I was just going to say, you know me, I didn't get a Super Nintendo until 2017, maybe
Okay.
2016. So
Yeah.
Super Mario RPG is still on my list. I know that it's a good one. I know that it is well loved. It shows up on top lists for everybody. But you like it? It's phenomenal. Care to share anything that you particularly enjoyed about it?
Yeah, so I guess what I would say is, in retrospect, it's probably the first, and I'm going to do air quotes, RPG that I ever played, right? Because it's a Nintendo RPG, and nothing against that, but it's just different than your typical like a Dragon Age or a Fallout, or something like that. You know, it's Mario characters. It's a team of Mario characters going around and battling Bowser's, and it's turn based like RPGs are, or like some RPGs are, right? And there's some timing that goes into jumping off of characters and timing your jumps correctly, and it's just a fun game. But there's good text and a good story behind it. As much as it's just another save the kingdom type of story, it's really has a lot of charm, and it just drew me in. And it's probably one of the Super Nintendo games that you could log a lot of hours into. I remember there being a Nintendo Power article or a cover page that had Mario RPG as the cover, and it said something like, "With graphics like this, do we even need the N64?" Because it came out like right before the N64 released. In fact, it may have come out after. I'd have to look that up. But was released on the Super Nintendo. So to its credit, graphics were really good. Gameplay was great. It's 10 out of 10 in my book.
Nice, nice. Well, I can't follow that, so let's move on to 2001, the release on Game Boy Color of Oracle of Seasons and Oracle of Ages. These are Legend of Zelda titles. Now, there was originally meant to be a third game. This was meant to be a trilogy, a Triforce, if you will. However, they found that it was going to be a little bit too difficult to develop 3 games in tandem. However, if you play Oracle of Seasons and Oracle of Ages, you know that there are ways in which you can basically take information from one game and into the other and unlock things. You can play one game having verified via a password that you beat the other one, and it'll change the ending and the end boss and such. The idea was that you would play Seasons and Ages first, and then you would play the third one. So while they didn't get all the way there, they had enough of those ideas that they sort of incorporated this alternate ending into
Yep.
Season and Ages. Quite an excellent game. I've played both Seasons and Ages. Seasons the whole way through. Ages I'm still working my way through, but it's very good. Now, in the year 2000, I'm sorry, I jumped forward. Now we'll jump back just a little bit. From release on the original PlayStation, Vagrant Story. A game that you kind of either loved it or hated it. It was a tactical third-person real-time tactical game. There was a lot of hard lessons to learn in that game, like switching up armors as well as weapons to work against very specific enemy types. Beleg Muradin here with us live loved Vagrant Story. I have a special feeling for Vagrant Story because it occurred within the same game world as one of my favorites of all time, Final Fantasy Tactics. It
Ah,
occurred inside of the world of Ivalice, and so there's a lot of similarities, a lot of time stuff. I think it occurred slightly after in the timeline, but it's one of those that was great. Yes, the art was fantastic, and yes, it took getting used to. It had puzzle segments that were at times a little bit rough because of the viewpoint and everything, but it was worth it. I still think that Final Fantasy Tactics had some of the best storyline of any game out there, and Vagrant Story similarly had some really good stuff in it as well. Sharing a game world meant that there was a lot of world building that had already been done so artfully and expertly that Vagrant Story couldn't help but to be a step above because of it. So now that I'm done gushing about Vagrant Story, let's move on to 2011 on release for the PC, Terraria.
yes.
So I've played a little bit of Terraria. I haven't played it in the past, I don't know, year or so. So I've missed out on some of the more interesting updates that have expanded powers and the like. But I quite enjoyed it. I think I want to say I poured maybe 50, 60 hours into it.
That's a lot, dude. Yeah, it's funny. You're like, I've played a little bit. I've dabbled. 50, 60 hours. To me, that's a lot.
Well, there are plenty of games that I've put 400 hours plus into. So,
Fair, fair.
so I feel like 50, 60, I feel like, yeah, that's me getting my money's worth.
Yeah, and honestly, Terraria. So my experience is very limited. I maybe put 2 or 3 hours into it because at the time it came out, I feel like I was just kind of getting into Minecraft a little bit, and I was like, okay, a side-scrolling, type of Minecraft. It kind of has like some Steam World Dig vibes where you're like digging underground, but there's also like monsters and bosses, and I just couldn't get into it. But I recognize what they're doing, and I appreciate it. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And yeah, I mean, that is what we had for video game history this week. Be sure to tune in next time where we will consider more games and how cool they may or may not be. But that's it for that. Mr. Nice Guy, over to you.
Cool. So, it's time for topic of the week where we take something relevant in gaming and discuss our opinions on it. Mac, this is something we've discussed a lot on the show, and I don't know if you're going to hit it up for legalese, but it's about Apple and xCloud, and you're not. You just shook your head no. So fantastic. So this comes from GameSpot.com by Stephen T. Wright. Apple clarifying why Microsoft's xCloud is not on the iPhone. And Mac, they make a really interesting argument. Um, and I want to get your opinion on this because you're the unofficial legal expert, right? You play a lawyer on the pod. Here's what this says, and we'll skip the introduction. But it says Schiller, who previously led the company's worldwide marketing for 30 years, said that Apple's approach to the App Store is consistent and thoughtful. The main issue at play here is Apple's requirement that all game streaming services submit its individual apps to the App Store for review. For services like xCloud, that means that Microsoft has to submit listings for hundreds of games. So let me break that down for everyone in the chat. Project xCloud, which we all know allows people to stream Xbox games to their mobile devices, right? On those mobile screens, is not on iPhone stuff. It's not on iOS, which is huge because iOS makes up a huge segment of the market. Apple's response to this is the reason it's not allowed is because we want people to submit ratings for every individual app. If xCloud was on there, we would need them to submit every single game for review, right? So if someone has Game Pass, they can't just hop in and play all the games. Each of those games need an individual review. I assume you're all following me.
Mm-hmm.
Here's the kicker. It goes on and says that Schiller stated this argument is justified because Apple would like to provide certain information to users for every app on the App Store, including an age rating, parental, a product page. Fair, I get it. But critics of Apple have often pointed out that the company does not require streaming services like Netflix to submit listings and product pages for each item in their catalog. To me, that breaks it down completely, Mac. But as someone who has kind of followed this, what do you think about that argument, that counter from Apple?
Well, I suppose that begs a question. Do you think that movies are different than games?
I think they are different. What do you mean though?
Well, I mean, yes, but it holds only so far as you think, as you would say, well, if, each movie is similar to each game, like if you think movies and games are kind of interchangeable, then that's a thing. I think one of the things that is somewhat different, and this is more of a back end thing, is that games often require access to your system in ways that movies don't. And while I'm not saying that Apple necessarily wants each game to be submitted individually for review so that it can check on the back end and make sure it's not doing anything hinky, it's one of those things that I think is a concern from a security standpoint. Now, that's not the argument that they made, at least not with their front-facing thing, but that could certainly be a consideration. So
sure, there's go ahead.
No, please.
Thought.
I was done.
Oh, okay. So you're right. You're 100% right. Like The games need access to save files that are on your system, right?
Hmm.
They need access to, internet, right? Your
Hmm.
IP,
In
right?
some cases, they need to be able to access your interactions. Maybe in the cases of some games, they need to be able to access your location or your other various haptics or, feedback,
Right, right. Or
things
or
like
like
that.
let's talk about Valorant, right? In order for Valorant to be able to work on your system, I don't know if this is still the case. They had to put another piece of software on there, a kernel, I believe it was called, um, so that they could make sure you weren't cheating, that you weren't running any other software in the background. And I could see, dude, this is a brilliant point that you've made. I could see Apple saying, no, we don't want to allow games, because sometimes they do that. But from strictly a content perspective, the argument about Netflix as a counter to this whole situation is 100% right. Netflix allows all kinds of movies, all kinds of shows on Apple's platform, or rather, Apple allows those on their platform without needing every single movie or every single episode of a TV show to be reviewed and get its own individual rating. And it goes back to the concept of whose responsibility is it for me to make sure that my kids are not, gambling online? That's mine. And it's the same thing here. Whose responsibility is it to make sure that users are using good things? It's the people in the home, right? Netflix has ratings on all their shows. Technically, every video game has a rating. I think it's up to the user to govern themselves there. I don't think Apple should be stepping in.
Hmm. Now, I have seen that Galvatron's mentioning this is Apple's way of trying to get a cut of every game instead of just a license for one app. And that may, in fact, be the case. This is actually something that has been coming up in the ongoing Apple v. Epic saga. That you have to clear the hurdle of making the case that Apple doesn't necessarily deserve their cut. And that's something that is currently being argued in court, that Apple does nothing really to justify their cut of profits from the App Store. Not something we can go into here at this time. It's beyond the scope of that, but I think it's worth acknowledging and asking ourselves, does Apple deserve a cut of the stuff that's on their platform?
Yeah.
Open
So,
question. Consider it on your own time.
yeah, to kind of wrap Mac, like you raised a valid question, and I don't have the answer to it. Are games and movies the same? And I think that is really what this comes down to. A question too big for the scope of our show.
Oh, nothing's
But
too big for the scope of our show, but maybe too big for the scope of just this one segment in this one
yeah,
episode. We'll have to revisit it again.
yeah, that's been our topic of the week.
All right, well, now we move to a crowdfunding project that's trying to get off the ground. We call this Kick or Kickstart. I'm going to post in the chat a link to a crowdfunding project. This one is on Kickstarter, and we'll take a look over it. For the first time here together, we'll discuss the virtues and the vices and say whether or not we think it should be kicked out of here or whether it should be kickstarted, and we want you to tell us what you think as well. We're going to be a little bit quick on this one. I'm not going to bury the lead here. Flowstone Saga has already reached its $20,000 goal, reaching, as of this moment, just shy of $22,000. So 10% over is what it's looking like. It still has 21 days to go. It is a 16-bit JRPG-inspired adventure. So, 16-bit, like Super Mario RPG, RPG, JRPG. I mean, it's all here. This is perfect. We've got a game that's functioning on puzzle-based arena gameplay. I mean, man, what to say? It's got a playable demo, which, as you know, is a big thing for me. If you are interested in a copy of the game, your minimum buy-in is $15 for the Pioneering Explorer. That is limited to 500, and there's only 53 of them left at this moment. So if you like what you see in the promotional stuff, as well as give the demo a try, then you've got that option. That includes, interestingly enough, both a digital game key as well as beta access. Normally, we see those split out into different categories and higher tiers. If you want to, go for more money, you can get more copies of the game, bundles of 2, add on some, some physical stuff. Eventually, maybe get to name a boss or whatever. Anyhow, Mr. Nice Guy, any thoughts here?
I mean, I have nothing but good things to say. This looks like one of those games that is going to be big. Like if we could all go back in a time machine and kickstart Hollow Knight and Shovel Knight, and those types of games where, they give it to you for $15, but then they support the game for like two years afterwards, and everyone who kickstarted it for $15 gets all the extra content that they make for the next few years just for free because you supported it early. We'd all go back and we'd support those, right? Because we all ended up playing them later anyway. And I feel like this is going to be that type of game, just at first glance. I'm surprised that they have only gained a little bit over their goal because this looks great.
Yeah. Well, and this is someone who we've actually discussed one of the previous projects of these same people in the past. If you remember Tangle Deep, it was a dungeon crawler kind of 16-bit style dungeon crawler roguelike. We talked about that back in the day, and yeah, but anyway, I'm glad to hear that you like it. I feel similarly. I'm a big fan. We are a little bit short for time, so I'll just suffice it to say kick it.
Can I ask one
Or sorry,
question real quick?
kickstart it. My bad.
Can I ask one question?
What's
Did
up?
Tangle Deep get kickstarted and did it get made?
I believe so, yeah.
Okay. All right. That's my only question. Then sorry, finish what you were saying.
Yeah, no. So, I mean, we're a little bit short on time, so I'll just say I like the look of Flowstone Saga. I say kickstart it. It's got that playable demo, and $15 is a good entrance price.
Yeah, I think 15 is perfect. What's the last question? I apologize. What system is this going to be on? What console?
PC and
Only PC. Okay.
let's see.
I'm trying to scroll through and find it.
Yeah, PC, Mac, Linux, and I believe they're planning on just sticking with PC. I don't recall seeing seeing plans to port to other. Although I could be wrong, I might have missed it the first time around.
And that's fine. With a $20,000 limit, that's realistic. So I say kickstart.
All right. Well, you guys know what to do. Let us know in the chat. And those of you who are listening to this podcast after the fact, just shout it out on your commute. We're tabulating the results from here.
Awesome. Well, now it's time for Nerd Flex.
Woo-hoo.
A segment where you, the viewers, try to stump the host. And lately, you've done a decent job at it. If anyone has a question they would like to get into the chat, friendly reminder, it should be gaming related and it should be multiple choice. Get those into the chat now. Mac, is this a sound test week? Or
no, this is not a sound test week. The next sound test week is going to be, I believe, episode 191. However, that does not mean that we shouldn't talk about them because there are still sound tests out there in the wild, many that you can go take a look at, listen, see if you know what game it originates from, and then tweet at 2nerdsindapod with the hashtag soundtest identifying the episode that you heard it on, and you might be in for a cool pin to whatever it is you pin things to. Woo.
Well, cool. Win those pins. And Mac, let's start with one of the questions from our test bank of questions. This is an interesting one. It's a Sega question. What color is the spiral on NTSC Dreamcast consoles? What color is the spiral on NTC Dreamcast consoles?
So NTSC would be, North America, right?
Yep. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So I feel like it's either red, orange, tan, something in there, red, orange, or cream, something like that. So I think red is my inclination for the spiral on Dreamcasts. But then again, I never had a Dreamcast. So,
I think the Dreamcast, I'm trying to remember, like, I'm pretty sure it was gray by default.
huh.
So it would have to be something that's not gray, like something that would stand out on a gray backdrop. And I thought it was like just white. I'm trying to picture it right now.
Well, to be fair, this is not a multiple choice question, so I think we are
Yeah.
within our rights to give two different answers.
Yeah, I'm gonna go with white. What are you gonna go with?
I'm
You
gonna
can't.
go.
You're gonna go with red, tan, or what was
No,
the other one?
I'm gonna go
Orange.
with red.
Okay, let's check it out. Dude, Beleg Moran in the chat says I thought it was orange, and Beleg Moran is correct. Moradin.
Ah,
Beleg Moradin. Dude, you were like on the right track.
yeah. Well, I just couldn't quite commit. It's been so long, too long, and I knew it was a sort of, but oh well. Um, hey, that's my that's unfortunately I did not snatch it from the jaws of defeat. So, maybe
No
I can
worries.
maybe I can make it up on the next one. Do we have another one from the test bank? We haven't
We-
got anybody bold enough to post a question in the chat yet for us. So,
Yeah, we can. You know what, man? We can just keep going with questions, in the chat. So here is, or rather, from the test bank. Here's one from the test bank. It's a Final Fantasy.
oh, I
Uh,
stand a ghost of a chance.
I have no chance whatsoever, so I'm going to rely on you. Who said it? Quote, "Hey, call me a treasure hunter, or I'll rip your lungs out."
Oh,
Who said? Oh, I don't need to read it twice.
no,
Okay.
so I think I'm inclined to say that that was from Locke in Final Fantasy VI. I seem to recall that or Final Fantasy 3 if you're going to be, US centric. But I feel like that was something like he had like an interplay with the narrator, sort of fourth wall breaking thing. So I want to
Oh,
say
okay.
Locke from FF6.
Okay, let's give it a shot. I'm going to go with that too, because I have no idea. Dude, it was Locke.
Yes, I'm redeeming myself.
It
That's
doesn't say the
fantastic.
game. It just does lock with an E. Was lock with an E, or was it with just a K at the end?
No, it
Back?
was with an E.
Okay, in your mind it was with an E. Then you are correct. Third question. Let's do it. Okay. Mario. This looks like it should be an easy one. What level does Mario race a penguin
Oh,
in
hang on.
Super?
Hang on. Let's save this one for later because Mets Girl has
Oh,
come with a Stardew Valley question. I will read this one. In Stardew Valley, of course, what is the most expensive sapling? Is it A, apple, B, peach, C, orange, or D, cherry? Which is the most expensive sapling? Now, I'm not going to get this right because I don't recollect, but I am at least thrilled that I got one right so that this is not a clean sweep.
yeah. Well, IRL, I feel like the most expensive fruit
Mm,
of all of those would probably be cherries,
mhm.
right? Like apples seem to be so much more common, oranges as well, peaches delicious, but cherries kind of a little bit more pricey per pound, I would think, right?
Mm, mhm.
And not just because you get a bunch of them, but I feel like cherries, you know, and also psychologically, I think that Mets girl would probably put the right answer as the last one,
I
but I
don't
don't
know.
know for sure.
I don't know about that. I'll go with you on cherries because your reasoning, up until the end there, your reasoning was pretty good there. So, but I'm willing to go with you on cherries. So we are going to say D, cherries.
Yeah, let's go with D cherries. Beleg Moran came with a bonus question that I know the answer to already. and I typed it in the chat hoping to beat him before he put the multiple choice.
Indeed, with
But
the
I feel like you gotta
game
give
company
him
that
that.
collaborated with Sony on the PlayStation was Nintendo before Nintendo stabbed them in the back on that one.
Yeah, we've
Ah,
talked about that one.
and
Dang.
sadly, the answer was B, peach. So it is the peach sapling that is the most expensive in Stardew Valley. Well, we can't win them all, but at least we didn't lose them all.
Yep.
Thanks,
And I can't type
everybody.
Ralph's name correctly. Have a good time at work, Ralph. Well, thanks for playing, everybody. We'll do more next week. Back to you, Mac.
All right, well, now we turn to a little bit of legalese. I am not a lawyer. I just play one on a podcast. And back in episodes 78 through about 82, I spent some time discussing where consumer rights stand with respect to video games. This subject has become more pertinent than ever, and as such, I wanted to revisit it in the light of new developments which have occurred over the past 3 years or so. And, also, let's not forget the much better microphones and editing that we have going on
Yeah,
now.
we've stepped
So,
our game up.
yeah, we've stepped our game up, so I think it's worth it. So, this will take the balance of legalese for the next 6 episodes, barring anything really crazy that we have to quickly respond to, as we cover video games as an art form, the stakeholders in video games, products and services, ownership and DRM, responsibility, and then finally the worst case scenarios. And so let's dive right in. Last episode, we explored the idea of what exactly is a video game. Mr. Nice Guy, we went back and forth on that, and I think it is fair to say that while we wound up in similar places, we didn't 100% agree. Would you say that's
Yeah,
fair?
I'd agree with that. Yep, fair.
So I think it should be no surprise that depending on when we draw the line for what is the first video game would depend, of course, on where we draw the line for what even is a video game. So forgive me when I say that this form of expression, video games, have been with us anywhere from 40 to 60 years, depending upon where you draw those lines. So that's longer than I've been alive. And that's perhaps longer than some of you who are listening, maybe longer than some of your parents have been alive, even. While I would certainly argue that this kind of presence, this length of presence, makes them a fixture in our history, I would certainly be willing to take up the argument that video games have shaped what we have today. Mr. Nice Guy,
Yeah.
have you ever felt like your life might have been changed, even in a small way, by a video game?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
Would you feel comfortable just identifying one that you thought made a difference to you?
Yeah, so I'll do it in a minute or less. I was doing stand-up comedy in college, and it really became a huge part of my identity. I got married, switched universities, and transferred away from all the comedy clubs and whatnot, right? Have I told you this story? I feel like I've told this story many times on the
No,
pod,
please keep
right?
going.
And one of the best times of my life, right? I was happily married, things were good. But being in a new place, I was looking for a job. I did not yet have one. My wife had a job, so she was gone a lot. And then I had classes. We were like ships in the night. And so in my free time, I would play Monster Hunter Tri. And it was one of the first online games I had played for the Nintendo Wii. It was the first game like that I had played. I got groups that I played with online, and I put several hundred hours into that game. And it helped me get through that period of not being able to do comedy for quite a while, and of just being super busy, but having downtime at a time when my wife was at work, right? So that really, it got me through that.
Yeah. No, I mean, I could point some out, but I don't want to even try following that. That's perfect, amazing, and fantastic. Thank you for sharing. Now, I would say that we've seen that the presence of video games can have an impact in our lives, but we've also seen how it's had an impact in, legal contexts. It's served as perhaps a point of contention for discussions about violence with lethal enforcers back in the 90s. Ideas about anxiety and belonging in video games take center stage in something like Celeste, right?
Yeah,
Ideas that are
yeah.
explored there. Concepts of justice and everlasting peace, central to Mega Man. Had to get that in there.
I want to hear your theory on this later because that's an interesting one that I've never heard.
In spite of the length of its history and the breadth of its topics, video games were not considered an art form until kind of recently. Mr. Nice Guy, I'm going to ask you, do you remember when it was that that video games were considered to legally be an art form?
Oh man, I don't, but I'm excited to hear the answer.
The answer would be 2011. So, throughout the history of it, it's only a relatively recent change that video games have been considered to be an art form. Now, this came up during Brown v. Entertainment Merchants Association. The background here is that the state of California was trying to limit to whom you could sell mature video games. And as is the case with the First Amendment in at least the United States, the concept is that the governments, both state and federal, cannot make restrictions on speech. And the question became, are video games speech in such a way that people can, that there's that. So I will just quote it from the majority opinion. Quote, like the protected books, plays, and movies that preceded them, video games communicate ideas and even social messages through many familiar literary devices, such as characters, dialogue, plot, and music, and through features distinctive to the medium, such as the player's interaction with the virtual world. That suffices to confer First Amendment protections. And yeah, that is when we knew that not just because of your interaction, my interaction with video games, that felt like they were an art form, that felt like they had a deep impact. This was the first time that legally we knew that video games were an art form. They were a protected art form. Now, perhaps it's because of this only recent consideration as an art form, video games have not been very well preserved for the experience of future generations, and in some cases disappear. We're going to discuss more about this in a later Legalese segment. And while individuals may have differing opinions on the values of video games, I think we can all agree we don't all value video games to the same level. But it is an art form that requires the combined time and effort of many individuals, from conceptualization and coding to promotion and distribution. And even the smallest scale video games require large networks of support in order to bring a game to us players. And a project that involves so many people and so much time and investment will have many stakeholders. Now, and here's what I want you to take home from this, because this is the idea we're going to be coming back to over the next 5 episodes. The conflicting interests of developers, publishers, and us gamers have far-reaching implications in the law for how video games are experienced and delivered, as well as preserved and unfortunately sometimes lost. So I know that this hasn't been the most hearty discussion of legalese. Sometimes we get a little bit more theory and rules of the case, but it's important for us to recognize that this is going to be a bit of a deep dive over the next several episodes about who has power, where that power is, how the contracts have been drawn up, and where that leaves you and me. So thanks for your attention on legalese. We'll be coming back with more next week.
Yeah, absolutely. And we got some awesome comments in the chat. I want y'all to know we are reading all of them. We're just a little behind on time, so we haven't really been able to respond to some of those that just came in. But that said, that's been our show. Now, before we go, we have one last thing we like to do called What We've Been Watching and What We've Been Playing. You know the drill. If you're here live, hit us in the chat with that cool, nerdy stuff that you've been into. watching and playing the past week. Mac, how about you, man? What have you been into?
Well, as a result of last week's video game history, I've picked up Aria of Sorrow again for the Game Boy Advance and have been playing through it and loving it. And, if I may say so, crushing it as well. As
Nice.
for watching, I've been watching a little bit of Stargate. Also been watching some Star Trek. Although apart from that, I haven't had much time for other video games or even other television. So that's been. Oh, that's not entirely true. I rewatched Thor, Marvel's Thor.
The first one or
Yep,
the all of them? Okay,
the
nice.
first one. So yeah.
Are you watching it in preparation for Loki?
No, at least that was not my intention. Um,
Loki comes out on the 9th of June, I believe. Correct me if I'm wrong on that, chat. And it's going to be, I believe it's another 6 episode thing, kind of like Falcon and Winter Soldier,
hmm,
on Disney Plus. And obviously it's about Loki. So,
yeah. Well, I look forward to it then. I will be prepared.
well, cool. As far as what I've been watching and playing, I've been playing a lot of Pac-Man 99. That game is so much fun. It's just a good combo of retro, but with the online functionality to make it like you're really competing against other people as opposed to just playing Pac-Man and competing against other high scores. So I've been having a blast with that. What else have I been playing? I always draw a blank. I need to start writing these things down pre-show. That's the main game I've been playing. As far as what I've been watching, Mac, my wife and I finally finished watching Arrow. Um, we've been trying to finish it for a long time. We were watching the last season and it is like 10 episodes long and we didn't know this. And like at the end of the episode I was like, "Oh, this is about to be it." And then the show just like ended abruptly. So now I can say I finished Arrow. Watching season 6 of Flash. Finished up season 10 of The Walking Dead right before we recorded. And that Negan episode was very, very interesting. I'll just say that. Uh, and that's it for me. What are people into in the chat this week?
All right. Well, we've got Beleg Maraudin playing Fell Seal Arbiter Mark. That's a kind of like Final Fantasy Tactics. It's on my Steam wishlist. We've got A.R. Wilson playing the same stuff, but will soon be playing the Series S next month.
Ooh,
Galvatron is playing Resident Evil Village, RE7, Crash Bandicoot 4, and Forza Horizon 4.
nice. And as far as what people are watching, we got less people typing. That's okay, though. We got Galvatron watching Those Who Wish Me Dead, Castlevania Season 4, and Shadow and the Bone. A.R. Wilson is watching and playing the same stuff. Okay, you read that already. And I think that's it. Yeah, people are a little quiet today. No
Oh,
one's watching TV. Everyone's getting out of the house, getting vaxxed up,
'tis the
getting back in
season.
public. Is the season. Well, Mets Grossa is playing D&D Stardew and Mario Odyssey. All good choices. And that is it for this week. Well, thank you so much for tuning in, everybody, to Two Nerds in a Pod, episode 189. You know what to do. Leave a rating on iTunes. Leave a rating wherever you're listening. Share it with your friends. Share it with your family. Share it with your enemies. We'll be back next week. Same bat place. Same bat time. Same bat rhymes. Keep it nerdy, y'all. Deuces.
See ya.